House of Mysteries.
This hotel seems to have quite a history, Mrs. Gallagher.
Who are you people?
A research team with special powers.
Oh my God.
She's experiencing the past.
Because we are all joined by our thoughts.
Has uncovered an ancient secret.
I have something I want to show you.
Metaphysically speaking, I killed myself.
But they are playing with an evil force.
What would you do with the power?
You can't save her, Alex.
They have given life to a deadly power.
We're all in danger.
And now a box of little toys
I think someone's in the room, Frank.
has become a gang of little terrors. Pinhead, Blade, Ms. Leach, Jester, and Tunneler. Irene Miracle, Paul Lamont, Barbara Crampton, and William Hickey as the Puppet Master.
Salutations, fellow idiots. Welcome to the show. You obviously know what we're up to today. We're up in here talk about that Puppet Master, baby. Or Le Puppet Master, as it's called in France and the Canadian province of Quebec. I'm joined today by good buddy and fellow full moon maniac Mason Egan over here.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, how are you doing, buddy? Thanks for coming on the show, helping us kick this series off proper. We're going all the way back to the beginning, at least as Full Moon as a brand, you know, a proper brand. And we're starting with the first film. That's Puppet Master, 1989. This film, you know, was written by Kenneth J. Hall and Joseph G. Collodi. It was directed by David Schmoller. It was produced by Hope Perello and Charles Band. It stars Paul Lamont, Jimmy F. Skaggs, Irene Miracle, Robin Freites, Barbara Crampton, and William Hickey. Had cinematography by Sergio Salvati, music by Richard Band, and puppet effects by David Allen. Obviously, the production company was Full Moon Productions, I believe they were known as back then. And it was distributed by Paramount Home Video with a budget of $400,000, most of which was probably spent on that stop motion. And a runtime of 90 minutes, we have Puppet Master. Absolute classic. I think it's safe to say we both probably have a decent history with this film. I'll let you start us off here, Mason. When, you know, roundabouts, when did you see Puppet Master for the first time? You know, what's your story with this flick?
Basically for me, mostly kind of when I come around, like how I encountered Puppet Master was basically like just some random searches on the web. I kind of like saw the trailer for it. Like, looked interesting. Like the puppets themselves are pretty cool. So basically, like the first time I watched it back in the time, like I had Netflix. I actually ended up like watching like the first film in it, and basically, when putting it on, I found myself just liking the movie itself, especially around the puppets themselves, as they all were pretty unique in their own way. Especially Blade, who is not only my fan favorite, but also like and almost everyone's favorite puppet in the film. But
he's basically the face of the series, you know. He's the mascot or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty unique, man. Those puppets certainly are visually striking. My story with Puppet Master goes a little bit further back than that. I did not have the benefit of the internet. I was a little kid, and I don't think that this was my first Full Moon movie because I don't remember, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Mike, who's in the comments, Jester Mikey himself, can correct me on this, but I don't remember seeing a ton of Full Moon trailers on other stuff that wasn't either a Full Moon movie or another Paramount Home Video movie. So it had to have been from some other Full Moon movie that I saw first or some Paramount movie, but I had seen the trailer for Puppet Master on a VHS tape back, you know, something I rented from the video store. And I ended up asking my parents, as you would do in the 90s, to, you know, pick it up for me from the video store. Like I was probably playing the Nintendo games or something, and I didn't want to go with them to the video store, which was a rare occasion. But I asked them to rent me Puppet Master, and they technically did. But what they rented me was that movie. I think it's called The Puppet Master or The Puppet Masters. And it's that fucking Donald Sutherland movie about aliens and shit. Still a good movie. I enjoy it quite a bit, but it was not what I was expecting, and I was bummed, to say the least. But they got it right the next time around. So, yeah. What were you about to say there, Mason? I saw you.
I was gonna say, like, I was actually familiar with that title, the Puppet Masters. I think I like saw a clip of it. It was basically around these like little like alien things that just control people's minds.
Yeah, it's like a body snatchers sort of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I did end up liking it, and I liked Donald Sutherland. I mean, he always creeped me out as like that fucking pyromaniac guy in the movie Backdraft. I think that was like the first thing I saw him in as a kid. So I liked Donald Sutherland, and I liked The Puppet Masters or whatever. It's one that I actually revisited a few years ago. But when you're expecting puppets, cool little tiny terror action, and you get like what's essentially classic sci-fi with Donald Sutherland, it doesn't hit the same. You know, the same thing happened when we wanted to see the Jim Carrey movie The Mask, and they ended up renting us Mask with that Rocky Dennis movie where it's got like Cher in there. Still a good movie again, but not what we wanted. But yeah, Puppet Master immediately flew into my rental rotation. It was definitely one of my most rented full moon movies. This one in particular. There's obviously a plethora of sequels that we'll discuss as we hit that point in the release schedule. But this first one was always just a standby one to rent and kind of show to your friends. And then if they dug this, you could jump to like the cooler ones if you really wanted to. Lots of times I would show someone this, and if they dug it, then I would immediately show them part 3. Because part 2 gets a little weird. I still really love it, and I'm looking forward to discussing it. But hey, what's up, baby? Sorry you couldn't get on the show today, man, but we're looking forward to, obviously, you taking your rightful place by my side, you fuzzy little devil, and talking about these full moon films. But yeah, pretty much became, you know, an instant rental classic in our household, and it remains one that I revisit pretty frequently today. It's just good, straightforward fun. You know, it delivers exactly what you want it to. It doesn't really necessarily overcomplicate itself in search of a sequel possibility, even though I'm sure they had that in mind. I don't know, what were your initial impressions of this first film specifically when you saw it the first time, Mason?
Basically, my first question is, I kind of thought it was kind of like unique in, although it is a sort of a slasher film with just a bunch of killer dolls. They kind of, it sort of had that sort of like mystery sort of feel to it, almost like a who done it, but the who done it is basically like who's in control of the puppets. As we saw in the opening, the one who created them after too long basically shot himself in the head. So, but there's also kind of this connection between him and the character Neil Gallagher, who basically killed himself the exact same way, kind of leading to that intertwining with the twist that he was the one who had the puppets under his control. And it was just
yeah. I think, you know, the whole twist at the end that their friend is not dead is still pretty effective if you've never seen the movie before. It's like, whoa, what? That guy's fucking alive and he's a scumbag. It's such a fun reveal, you know, and he is still, I think, for my money, my favorite villain of all the Puppet Master movies, just because it's so classic and slimy. We'll talk more about Neil Gallagher when we get in there and break it down, but I think my first impression was very similar to yours. You know, being a child of, you know, the late 80s and growing up around all that stuff, the pop culture and the movies of the time. I mean, obviously we liked tiny critters and whatnot. You know, I had probably seen even Ghoulies before I'd seen this movie. Obviously I'd seen Gremlins before seeing it. So I had a taste for the tiny terror stuff. And Puppet Master just hit a little different. You know, there's Nazis, there's like actual blood and gore, titties. I mean, it's a, you know, I don't know if I fully appreciated all that stuff yet, but you could tell that there's something special about this movie when you watch it, and how each of the puppets, without saying anything or doing anything too drastic in this film other than knocking people off and some minor comic relief, they all have their own distinct personalities, like right out of the gate, which is pretty cool. So, you know, I think even as a little kid, I knew that this was pretty special and that I needed to see more of them. And thankfully, by the point where I saw it, there was at least up to Puppet Master 5 out at the time. So I was able to rent all those as well. And, you know, we'll talk about those as we get to them. We've got a pretty good cast of characters in this film. We're going to break them down, and we're going to break down our cast of puppets. Obviously, we have Andre Toulon, played by one William Hickey. Dude is a legend. I mean, he's a crusty old guy in a lot of movies that we remember. The one that I think I was first introduced to him with was Christmas Vacation, the National Lampoon's movie. But he's shown up in some other stuff. He actually shot Pink Cadillac, where he's also a crusty old dude, the same year that he did Puppet. Well, I'm guessing they shot him the year before or whatever. But both 1989 films that William Hickey was in was this and Pink Cadillac with Clint Eastwood, which just by pure chance I ended up watching for the first time like a month ago. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, you know, he's not much in this film. He's basically just there for the little intro sequence. It's, you know, him putting the finishing touches on Jester, which, or touching him up, I don't know. But if you look at it as that he's building Jester right there, it does make some sense why Jester doesn't do as much in this film, because he's like the baby of the group. You know, he's just barely been born, kind of a thing.
He's like the little brother of the group, and like the kind of the reason, although we can get later on why, like the other puppets are basically like more protective of him. He's basically the weakest of the group.
The weakest, but the MVP in a lot of cases, as we'll see in the sequels for sure. And in some senses in this, you know, but he's putting the finishing touches on Jester, and Blade, who's out doing some reconnaissance, doing some scouting. Hell yeah. You know, he spots these Nazi agents that are coming up there to try and snatch Toulon and his secrets or whatever. And he's obviously aware that this is going to happen. And Blade tells him as much. So he stashes all the puppets in a hole in the wall and he shoots himself. We got to talk a minute about what I've called the Hickey headshot. It's the first on our list of kills for the film, and it's whack. Yeah, I don't know what was going on, or maybe William Hickey was just too old to oh shit, we got a Jester. I don't know what was going on, or maybe William Hickey was just too old to shit, we got a Jester. I don't know what was going on, or maybe William Hickey was just too old to
You're wearing this shit. As you can see, I'm actually wearing one too. As you can see here, yeah. Though it's kind of different. It's basically the same. Yeah. Cool. Mo, your mic's off.
Oh shit. Yeah, you got some crazy audio loop going there, Mikey. I think your output volume for us is too loud, so it's feeding back into your microphone. Your output volume for us is too loud, so it's feeding back into your microphone.
I think it's more lines like the live stream is being played on your computer, which is carrying on to the audio of the live stream. The live stream is being played on your
I think you're right.
carrying on to the audio of the live stream.
But it was rad seeing you, dude.
I think
For
you're
sure.
right.
All right, so the Hickey headshot is just awkward, man. It for whatever reason they were not able to execute it properly. Maybe William Hickey's too old to properly sell shooting himself in the head, so it just feels like he's putting a prop gun in his mouth and a cap gun's going off, and there's like a little splat of blood on the wall. And if you were like an effects aficionado or something at the time, I don't think any of us were because we were kids, but like I probably wouldn't have been too impressed with that and would have been skeptical of the film. Thankfully, they make up for it immediately, you know, as the film progresses. And you've already seen some stop motion by that point, which I think helps save it too. If we hadn't seen those stop motion sequences with Blade, I think that the Hickey headshot might be one of those things where you would like groan when you see it at the intro of the movie, like, this is the kind of film that we're looking at here. Maybe that's being too critical, I don't know, but it's like the worst effect in the movie. And it made my notes because of that, because it's just always one of those things whenever I see it, I'm like, all right, that's over with. Now let's get to the good stuff in the film again, you know. But basically, he stashes the puppets in the wall. Those Nazis are shit out of luck. And we sort of flip to the present day, right? And we're introduced to the other people in the film. But I think, you know, the intro with Toulon does a good job of setting up this idea that this guy has these ancient Egyptian secrets or whatever that he's using to bestow life onto these puppets. Obviously, this is the idea in its, like, you know, its nucleus state or whatever before it evolved into what it would be in the rest of the series. It's very much more like, is that movie 9 where the guy is like imparting his life into the little sack dolls and then he ends up dying and they have to go on like some crazy gothic horror quest or whatever? Have you guys seen that movie?
I actually seen that movie. It was so basically like, take place like in the post-apocalyptic setting. There was only these like nine dolls, and the recent one that they created, nine, accidentally ends up on you awakening like this one machine that's basically able to like suck the souls out of them.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, that's the movie. But is there not like an old dude at the beginning?
Yeah, there's an old guy, and he was like the scientist who was trying to create new.
Yeah, and he's like bestowing his life kind of into them, like a little. Every time he makes them alive, he has to give a little piece of himself, kind of a thing. Which maybe even is a reference to Puppet Master. Because that's sort of what the idea that they're putting across with William Hickey in this intro scene is. He's like, oh, life from my life or whatever, and brings the puppets to life. And then obviously later it's like a serum and shit. Yeah. But in this one, it's got very much more of that old folklore feel to it. And I really do think William Hickey looking so old really sells the idea that, you know, he's taking a little piece of his life and putting it into these puppets. He's one of those dudes, every time you see him in a movie, it's kind of like John Carradine. Like, you're not certain he wasn't dead already when they shot it, you know? Like, is someone propping him up and working him like a puppet? I don't know. Rest in peace, William Hickey. You were awesome. You were an awesome, scary old dude, and I miss seeing you in movies. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Toulon portion of the film?
Personally, the Toulon portion kind of felt like, in a way, like it's kind of so like a good introduction. Like, of course, we learn more about in a way the later film, like it's kind of so like a 2 and also Puppet Master 3. Of course, we learn more about in a way the later film, like it's kind of so like a 2 and also Puppet Master 3. Of course, we learn more about in a way the later film. As I was saying, like we kind of learn more about him specifically in 3 because in 2 his mind wasn't really in the right place, so we don't really know like his true personality or what he's really like in that film. His mind wasn't really in the right place. It felt like more anonymous, of like true personality. There's this guy, Nick probably knows how to bring him to life, and these 2 guys.
All right, hold on, we got to figure out the audio issue, man.
These 2 guys.
All right, hold on, we got to figure out the audio issue, man. Do you have like some earbuds you could rock, Mikey? All right, hold on, we got to figure out the audio issue.
I don't have anything except for
Do you have like some earbuds you could rock, Mikey?
headphones, that's it.
Hey, that'll work, man. That'll stop us from feeding into the mic.
Headphones, that's it.
Hey, that'll. All right. Apologies, fair listeners. We're figuring it out. You know, this is a low budget show. much like the movies we're going to be discussing on it. We're doing this from scratch. Mikey's going to get his headphones set up over there, and then we'll have his expert input on here because he probably is the most fucking awesome, like insane Full Moon fan any of us know.
Yeah, obviously.
The dude literally could open a Full Moon museum and showcase shit from all of these films, including old like video store standees and everything you can imagine. So I'm definitely wanting Mikey on here, and it is awesome that you're getting on, dude. And if it comes down to it, I'll order you like a mic and a pair of headphones if we have to, so that you can be on here regularly because we need you. You know, that's going to make this show. Yeah, that's what's going to separate us from other people covering Full Moon films for sure, is having dudes like, you know, you guys that really go full nerd with it and get involved in all the stuff and have collected, especially over the years, like Mikey. You know, there's a lot of history in his Full Moon dungeon over there, and I'm looking forward to showcasing it to you guys. Anyway, sorry, you know, what were you saying about old William Hickey as the puppet master there, Mason?
Like I said, it in a way, like we learn more about Too Long as a character in the later film, more specifically in 3, as like in 2, his mind wasn't really in the right place, so we don't really know the kind of person he is. But in this, he in a way it kind of seems like it's all like there's this kind old man who makes puppets, but there's sort of a secret, like he knows how to bring them to life. These two guys, they want to know his secrets, and they kind of actually plan on just actually killing him just to get them, as the two guys just had guns and like their way to blow him to smithereens if he doesn't answer the door.
Well, I mean, let's not jump to conclusions, okay? They might have thought that this dude had a strap himself or something, and he was willing to pop some caps, you know? So yeah. They could just have been doing that as a precautionary measure.
Yeah.
The serum doesn't exist in this version of it, or, you know, so they kind of need him to teach them this stuff, you would think. Unless they think the puppets are like some technological contraption and they're going to kill him to take them, but...
But of course, later on in the movie, one of the Neil actually ends up like bleeding like a green liquid. Of course, Leo.
That's embalming fluid, my friend. That is actually in my notes because I always thought it was weird. And you know, from watching the later movies, you kind of assume that it's the puppet master fluid because but it's more yellow than it is green. And then when I was watching it this time, at 35 years old, it finally dawned on me, like, oh, he's dead. He's been dead and like prepared for a funeral. So the yellow ooze flying out of his fingers in that finale sequence is like formaldehyde or embalming fluid or whatever that shit is that they put in you when you die, you know, which is such a cool touch on the effects department. I mean, they could have been lazy and just had it be the regular red blood they had lying around. But they swapped it out for that yellow formaldehyde shit, and that's just such a metal touch to it. You know, the dude's spurting formaldehyde as they're dismantling him. It's a great finale, and we're gonna go in depth on that. You know, we also have our cast of characters in our little psychic Avengers team in the film. We've got Alex Whitaker, played by Paul Lamont, who is one of the driest dudes ever. You know, I don't understand why he's like an acclaimed actor, as they claim in the, you know, No Strings Attached little mini documentary on the desk. He's not terrible. There's a real likable quality to Paul Lamont as well, which is probably why he's acclaimed, I guess. Maybe not on his acting merits, but just the fact that there's something about this guy and his helmet hair that I really like, you know? There's even lines he delivers in this movie that sound like they came right from the shitty script of one of the first Resident Evil games. But somehow I just really like him saying it. I mean, I don't know. Are either of you guys particularly sold on Alex Whitaker as the protagonist of this film? Or does he feel like a dad who doesn't normally dress up that nice? That's kind of awkwardly there, but making the best of it. And I think that's what I love about him. And I don't know how they centered on him to be the guy that headed this entire film in the cast department, other than that he was well known from other stuff. Again, none of this is a dig at Paul Lamont. I think that the dude's fantastic. but fantastic in a way that does not include his acting abilities. You know? What are your thoughts, Mason?
Basically on Paul Man and as a character, I mean, in a way he's a good protagonist, though in a way like he's more, as he never actually once really encountered the puppets till the final act of the movie. Though there was that one scene with Blade actually running around in his room, though not seeing him. Like he's mostly like one of the few who isn't really aware of what's going on, unlike the other character, Dean.
He spends the majority of the movie wandering around the hotel.
Yeah.
And at one point he even says that he just kind of likes wandering. He's like a dad that you bring to a convention that he has no interest in, really, you know, but he's just kind of like wandering around. Maybe he's eating a slice of pizza and like wondering what these furries are or something like that. I've been in that position with my own father, and it's very similar. You know, he's just kind of wandering around the event for most of the movie. I think he's like making drinks when the puppets are running around his apartment, isn't he?
Actually, like he was making drinks. He was also like lighting that one candle that was given to him by Dana
Hadley.
Yeah,
there
Dana
we
Hadley.
go. We got Mikey in. Oh no, we still got feedback, man. Those headphones not working for you?
I don't know. I guess not.
It's less than it was before. So we're approaching like a point where this can work. Is there a way you can turn our volume down some more, or turn your mic sensitivity down? I'm not sure what your setup is.
It's my first live stream. My first time doing this. I'm just trying to figure out.
Oh, you're doing great, man. We've already gotten further with you troubleshooting it than most people would the first time. So you're doing awesome.
Thanks.
So yeah, just keep tinkering with it, man. We're gonna get this dialed in. But yeah, Dana Hadley's actually next on the list of characters. But before we move on, am I wrong, or does Paul Le Mat have a glorious helmet affair in this film? I mean, every time that I see it, it brings me joy.
I guess it's yeah.
It's very helmetish, man. I mean, you know, and that's not to say that it's like in the 80s or, you know, earlier fashion where it's like all super glued down with hair product. It's flowing, baby. This guy's got some airflow through that thing. And there's times where it's even kind of sexily wisped to the side, you know, and he's supposed to look a little more disheveled. I don't know, man. I'm not complaining about him being in the movie at all. It's just such a bizarre choice as the lead of the movie. Like in any other horror film, this dude would be like a secondary character to the lead character. And in this film, he's for some reason the main guy and just seems oblivious to that fact. And there's even a point where he's supposed, I mean, you can tell that, like, again, in any other horror movie, he would have had some sexual tension with this widow of his friend, or they would have kissed at some point. They would have become a love interest situation with him and Megan. But it just doesn't, because Paul Le Mat is so disinterested and wandering around the hotel for the whole fucking movie. But I love him for it, man. And that hair is a sight to behold. Dana Hadley, though, the White Witch, played by Irene Miracle, which I think is such a cool last name for her, especially considering this character. She is sort of a con woman, grifter, like fake fortune teller type lady that just so happens to be a legit like witch, pretty much. You know, she is what her gimmick is. She just grifts people with that gimmick out of, I guess, like laziness. I don't know. I mean, you know that she has the powers. So when there's that whole scene with her and Barbara Crampton at the beginning of the movie, you're like, why isn't she actually reading their fortunes then? But I think she just legit doesn't care. And that's what makes her the baddest bitch in any Puppet Master movie ever. Dana Hadley is probably my favorite character in the franchise. So
one
nostalgic.
of my favorites as well.
Yeah, dude. She's just perfect. You know, she perfectly portrays the character in a believable way. I like the fact that she's got that Southern Belle accent, which is just not what you expect. Like when you think of like a fortune teller or something like that, you think of like sort of a new age California hippie type of a character. But this lady's a legit like witch, so she probably does like, well, she's doing like voodoo stuff in it at some point. So there's like the, you know, cultural connection with the South as well. And it's just such a perfectly written, perfectly portrayed character. All of her dialogue in this movie rules. She's kind of that person in there, like stripping away any pretense to anything and making sure that everybody knows that they're all assholes and that they all kind of would take advantage of this puppet master power if they could get a hold of it. She's the only one who seems like concerned with sort of preventing that or protecting other people against it. I love the character. So for now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to tag you in tag team style, Mikey, when we need you to talk, and we'll just wait to talk so that you can say your piece and then mute your mic real quick. And then we'll jump back in that way. That's at least a workaround for the problem. We'll do some off-air troubleshooting with this so that we can get your audio thing set up. But you were wanting to say something about one Dana Hadley as well. So take the floor, Mikey.
Well, Dana Hadley is one of my favorite villains, I should say, as well.
I guess you could call her a villain. I mean, all she really does in the movie is ruin a dinner, you know?
I mean, in a way, like aside from Alex, all the other psychics are kind of scumbags in a way.
Yeah, they really are. And they don't really try to hide any of that. I mean, you know, other than Alex, the other people involved are all kind of self-serving pricks, you know, and that fully would take advantage of this power. Case in point, Alex could have taken advantage of the power, but he just catches a cab and leaves at the end of the movie. Like, he literally does not give a shit about any of this stuff, you know?
That makes you think, in a way, if the puppets were really the villains of this movie, if the people that they actually killed are in a way the people that kind of deserved it. In some way.
Sort of. I don't know if they deserve to die, which we'll jump into as we get to those. But you do bring up a good argument there for this film. Nobody that's actually dispatched in it, save for the housekeeper, is really a bad person. And she randomly pops up again later in the movie, which I still find fucking hilarious. Nothing ever comes of it. You know, what happens to her? She just comes. Do you know the answer, Mike?
I gotta get back to that.
I think it was more lines like, I think Neil might have brought her back first, like because he went all along the lines when he counted Alex. He was like, "It's time to die, Alex, so you can live forever."
Right, but then she just pops up like again to say, "Don't touch the body" or whatever, and she's holding that fire poker, and then
I think that was mostly along lines like the magic. It's kind of like twisted her mind in a way.
I could get behind that. Yeah, maybe she wasn't really dead. Maybe they just knocked her out, and there's like a deleted scene where she has like a, you know, audience with Neil, and it's revealed earlier that he's like not completely dead. You know, that could be a fun fan theory.
Yeah, kind of takes one kill out of the film for Pinhead, though.
Well, Pinhead's the MVP for sure, because in my mind, he got like 3 kills in this movie. So we're talking about Neil briefly here, and we've already talked about how I think he's, you know, maybe he's not the best villain in the Puppet Master movies, but he's the most nostalgic for sure. He's the most classic of them because he was the first. What do you think of him though in general? I mean, it is pretty badass that this dude figured out that there was this old puppet master that could animate inanimate objects, like probably just doing random research. And then he thought to himself, you know what I need to do is put together like this random Avengers team of psychics to figure this out, like people that are supernaturally gifted. And then he actually does it, finds the people that own the hotel where he stashed the puppets, kills them, marries their fucking daughter as an excuse to start doing renovations on the hotel. Eventually, you know, spends probably untold amounts of money tearing the place apart. finds the puppets, fires everybody, and shoots himself in the fucking head. Yeah. Like, that is maybe the crazy. It's a perfect villain backstory, you know. And then you're like you said, there's the whodunit and the whole mystery of like, why did this guy kill himself? Maybe he's thinking his friends will find these puppets and use the secrets to bring him back, thus proving his whole theory. But no, it was all an elaborate trap to lure them into this hotel so he could kill anybody who had any knowledge of this scheme and keep it all to himself. I mean, it's perfect villain shit, you know. I think that's the master stroke in the writing of this movie is the whole Neil Gallagher story. What do you think, Mason? And then we'll let you tag in Mikey when you're done.
Yeah. Neil Gallagher is like, he is actually like a pretty memorable villain. Like in where like his introduction, he kind of comes off of like, yes, I am, with like the shock that they think he's dead. And he just plays it off like it's the sort of a joke, and he kind of tries to come off like reasonable. Like when I said like, why did you kill them? And he goes all like we're all joined by our thoughts. I had to bring you here, and he just to show how much more of a scumbag he was. He basically like threw Jester, kind of showing that the puppets don't really mean that much to him. They were just a tool for his own master plans, which kind of led to his demise. Mario's mic's off again.
Said that's where he messed up, man. You don't mess with that Jester. Speaking of Jesters, what are your thoughts on old Neil Gallagher, Mikey?
Well, I guess I'm just going to have to say that when he threw Jester, I guess that tells the other puppets they're just going to have to kill him, go after him, because the puppets are all together.
Right on. What do you think of Jimmy F. Skaggs' performance as Neil Gallagher?
I think it was pretty good. A really good villain, so yeah. It was awesome. It was a pretty good performance.
I think the most striking thing for me is how creepy he looks when he's just sitting motionless as like dead Neil. You know, there's a couple points where that boy's just popping up in random hotel rooms or sitting up in the sitting room and making his wife faint. And I always thought as a kid that the puppets were moving him around. But, you know, in hindsight, clearly he's like getting up and doing it himself. He was just laying there the whole time, which makes the movie pretty hilarious when you think about it, that Neil's just been like laying there playing dead the whole time. One of my favorite scenes in the movie, which actually made my notes as well, is where they have the whole, you know, psychic reunion / wake for Neil, pretty much, because none of these guys know he's dead. The whole crux of this is that he was able to lure them all in with a psychic message, but then they get there and they find out that he's been dead the whole time, presumably, and that somehow none of them picked up on this, even though that's literally what they do. So there's the whole scene where they have like their solemn little wake for him, and then they're leaving, but all of our scumbag characters want to stay with the body, and the housekeeper's like, don't touch the body, you know. And of course that's what they do. You know, our main chick, Dana Hadley here, who really should have been the main character of the movie, she ends up poking him with that fucking voodoo needle or whatever, just to prove that he's dead, which in theory should have worked if there wasn't other stuff at play here, you know. But yeah, I think, you know, Jimmy F. Skaggs really threw it down in this movie. And when you really consider the screen time that he's actually acting in it, he's in it for a very brief period of time, other than just sitting there as a motionless corpse, which they could probably shoot in like an hour, those scenes, you know. But just great powerhouse performance from him, I think. Megan Gallagher, played by Robin Freites. If wearing ugly sweaters and being basically pointless to the progression of the movie was a character, it would be Megan Gallagher. I mean, I don't understand why she's here, especially given that there was no love tension between her and Alex Whitaker. So she's just kind of there to deliver little bits of the story that the other people don't know yet, you know, which really could have been done by the housekeeper, who was more charismatic. I thought that, you know, what's her name? Muse Small, who played Teresa, was adorable. She was a dedicated housekeeper. She clearly cared about the, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Gallagher or whatever. She was doing her job and doing it well. You know, making sure they're not molesting the corpse while they're out of the room. She was covering all the bases, you know. But I guess they thought they needed this Megan Gallagher character. And I'm sure Robin Freites is a lovely woman. I'm sure she's done other good stuff. But this, I mean, and she's not bad in the movie. She's just kind of boring. She doesn't do or say anything really cool and just kind of wears ugly sweaters and hangs around and answers a couple of questions. What do you guys think about the Megan character?
Basically, kind of Megan get along lines. It's in this. She's in like the same league as Alex. Like she's along what she, despite being like one of the survivors, she had like zero actual interactions with the or encounters with the puzzle itself, aside from like the one scene with Jester watching her behind the curtain when she was like mourning Neil's death.
That's true. Yeah, that is, I think, the only interaction she has with the puppets in the entire movie, you know, other than watching them dismantle Neil at the end, which we will get to.
And there was like the ending with the whole twist with the, but I think we'll get to that later.
Leroy. What about you, Mikey? What do you think about the Megan character? I mean, am I totally off base here?
Oh, I agree. Well, I'm going to say
you know, when you stump the master, the character really is pointless.
yeah, sure is. Yeah, I'm going to have to say.
All right, so yeah, Megan is just, she's there. That's the best. That's the best thing that we can say about her in the film. We've got, of course, you know, a couple other MVPs in this is Frank and Carissa, who might be, they're in the running in my top tier list for maybe weirdest characters in a horror movie ever. Does Frank have actual powers, or is he just a pervert that's hanging around like this psychic girl that seems to really get tuned into sex that's happened in places and taking like notes and researching it? Like, I could never, every time I watch this movie, it always feels like Frank is the non-psychic of the group, but he has access to a bunch of tech that can help verify the psychic stuff. Because there's that scene where they're at that, like, that sleep study or whatever, and he's interpreting all this shit from the dream, and the girl who clearly, you know, has psychic abilities is like, I'm not getting any of that, you know. I think you just want to bang this girl is pretty much what's going on there. And he never seems to tap into any of the stuff she's talking about in the movie too. Like there's the whole scene where she's, you know, in the what did I call it?
Elevator.
Oh, in the elevator, yeah, and she
there was
sees
the one
that,
in like the bed, and then
yeah, where Clark Gable and Carol Lombard went at it or whatever.
I think they mentioned in the film like him and Neil will basically like partners in a sense, and they sense like they're like the two that actually kind of started this little psychic group.
Right. So basically Neil went to his buddy who was interested in this stuff and had a bunch of money and tech that he could put behind it. And they started this Avengers group of people. So he would be, I don't know what Marvel analogy you could use there, but I'm sure there's one.
Like the Hawk?
He's like, I guess you could say Frank is sort of like maybe the Nick Fury of it. Like he's not, you know, he doesn't have powers or anything, but he has access to all the government shit that they need to do the stuff. And he's kind of a badass in his own right. Or in the case of Frank, a pervert. You know, I really get a kick out of these guys in this movie every time I watch it. They're the main comic relief of the film because they're just so sleazy and weird the whole time. They don't really do anything of note in the movie other than get killed in probably one of the most iconic sequences in Puppet Master history. And they do everything they need to do. They do it convincingly. Frank, especially with his weird hairline and his ponytail and just his whole way of being. Matt Rowe is his name that played Frank Forrester. That guy really dials up the sleaze in this movie, and it's better for it. And then, Catherine O'Reilly, who played Carissa. I feel like I've seen her in some other stuff, maybe. In my notes, it just says she's less hot than Dana. She's kinky, sleazy sidekick to Frank. And that's pretty much it. She does deliver exactly equal proportions of sleazy, kinky weirdness to Frank. They're real good, playing off of each other. And I really like that scene where he puts the pantyhose on his head and scares her in the bathroom. It's good stuff. What do you guys think about Frank and Carissa, I guess? We'll go with you first, Megan. Or Mason.
You call me Neil's wife. Okay,
You're not wearing an ugly sweater, so I'm not sure how that happened. Go ahead, Mason.
Well, when I first glanced up, especially from like the first thing with when Clarissa was having that vision with Neil sexually assaulting that woman, there was in a way there was that sort of like she kind of almost like sympathetic, like she was like being traumatized, she was crying all that, like she actually could see that in a way. Neil was like a real scumbag of a human.
Scumbag, kind of an evil son of a bitch, actually. Yeah. That whole sexual assault sequence in the film in the elevator is probably the most like cringe inducing, sort of repulsive part of the film, I think, because it's just, he looks so animalistic and savage in it, and he's like, obviously the woman in the sequence played it up too, and that's probably the most acting outside the final sequence that old Jimmy F. Skaggs does in the movie, and it's pretty uncomfortable, dude. And it also really showcases how, Muse Smalls as Teresa actually cares about Mrs. Gallagher, because she's like, please don't mention this shit. I mean, she's going through enough. I don't really know that she needs to find out that her husband raped some random hotel guest in the elevator. It probably isn't going to do her any good at the moment, So that's one of the better scenes in the movie, I think, in terms of, the writing and performances and everything else. And I would agree with you, Mason. I think that is probably her highlight scene in the movie. So in terms of legitimate acting and conveying more than just sleazy, kinky weirdness, she's probably better than Frank in that regard.
Like that and her death scene with Tunneler.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think that's kind of like the most iconic part of their characters, is basically how they were killed.
Yeah, a taste of Tunneler, I called it in my notes, because she takes it in the mouth, right?
Yeah.
Mikey, what are your thoughts on, the Frank and Carissa?
Well, they're always together, and I guess they're kind of like life partners, because they're always with each other. And about that elevator scene, that part when Neil Gallagher sexually assaulting that woman, what if that woman was with another guy, or partnered with another boyfriend or something?
Mm-hmm. Your mic's off again.
It's a good point.
Sure is. I just thought about it.
Yeah, and thing is, with it being at a motel, she likely was, or on her way to see one or something, the whole thing is fucked. Like, it's easy to just look at it as being like a fucked up scene when you look at it without the context that they were actually still presumably running a working hotel at the time. And the girl is never mentioned by anybody, so it's clearly just a random patron of the hotel, it just makes it scary and a bit gross, or grosser than it already is. And I guess that really kind of covers our character list here. The only other person that's on the character list is Barbara Crampton as the lady at the carnival, and we already kind of talked about that. I think it's a cute cameo. It really helps establish, Dana Hadley's.
You forgot the housemaid Clarissa, basically like the particularly the first victim of the housemaid?
No, we've been talking about
Yeah.
Teresa. Yeah. She's the lady that tells him don't touch the body or whatever. She's in there, but Barbara Crampton does deserve a mention. She's she has a history with Charles Band and all that stuff.
Yes, Barbara's like a full moon star, along with other actors like Jeffrey Combs and those kind of people.
Yep. Phil Bondico, Tim Thomason, just name a few.
Yeah, I mean it's she's made some regular appearances in Full Moon and Empire films over the years, so it's cool to see her in there. It really does help establish Dana's like sleazy grift backstory of being this cheap carnival fortune teller that just lies to people and makes shit up. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie because she could be doing it legit. I mean, that's well established through the rest of the film, but she's choosing to she's choosing to con these people and give them false information for fun, presumably.
Like, I think, like in that scene, she was basically like telling them, like, good for like, you're gonna have a baby girl, you're gonna build a shop, you're gonna build a shopping mall, you're gonna get rich. Like these are like, she's like trying to like give them.
Yeah, she's leaning into the grift, trying to give them what they want so she can get their money, and then it's interrupted, obviously, by this psychic message from Neil Gallagher. But that pretty much does our cast of character list. You had something to say, Mikey?
Yeah, she gets interrupted by when Blade's gonna kill her and slit her throat. That's what I was about to say.
Your mic's up again. Your mic's up. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I don't know why it got stuck for a sec. Yeah, she. I guess you could say all these people get their comeuppance. They're just sort of generally sleazy. I don't think any of them really deserve to be dispatched by tiny German puppets in a rundown hotel. Maybe they just deserve to spend a few years in federal prison or something like that. I mean, that probably could have been fine. But yeah, the cast of characters is pretty well balanced. You got Alex being the pure neutral white bread guy in the situation, with, I guess, Megan and her Angora sweaters being like his, balancing point. It's just pure normalcy right there for those two characters. And then everybody else is fairly sleazy, so you don't feel too bad when they get killed. Right now, we're going to dive into the cast of puppets, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other deaths that are inflicted by those puppets as we work through the rest of the film. But pretty much at this point, all of the people have been gathered in the hotel. They've taken their respective rooms. They're waiting to figure out the reason that Neil has summoned them all here. Clearly, he tapped into this puppet master's secrets. They're aware of it, as we're made aware of by Alex's whole monologue, where he explains the entire story behind the Avengers group of psychics to Megan, after Dana awesomely ruins a dinner by getting drunk and real mean. And so that's kind of where we're left. I'm going to let you guys hold down the fort for just a second. Mason, you tag back and forth with Mikey for a minute. I'll be right back. I have to let my dog out and grab some cold beverages. So
let's see. No.
Oh shit. Sorry, Mason. I thought he was going to be here. So that's all taken care of. So we're going to dive into our cast of puppets here. We actually technically have, let's see here, 7 puppets featured in this film. We've got Blade, Jester, Pinhead, Tunneler, Leech Woman, Shredder Khan, and Genji. So let's go ahead and just talk about Genji real quick. He's just sort of sitting there in the puppet trunk, if I remember correctly. He looks a little bit like he may have had Dhalsim powers from Street Fighter. Like maybe he ate some spicy curry and could blow fire. I mean, it was the 90s, so vaguely racist stuff was allowed, you know, and it's kind of been celebrated throughout Puppet Master as like a fun thing, you know, like who cares? They're not getting too sensitive with it over there. None of it's really mean-spirited anyways, but I do think that if they had done something with this puppet, they probably would have had him doing some Dhalsim, some fucking Yoda flames, some yoga flames would have been going down, dude. And I just, you know, that's it. I mean, what else can we really say about Genji? Is he really a puppet that we were bummed didn't feature in more films? I don't think so.
Genji to me, though, I guess this kind of goes along with Shredder Khan in a way. He was sort of more like a background character. Like he, unlike Shredder Khan, who kind of had like a scene in the opening. He was just like there in the background. Almost like he was just like a prop. Just a prop.
Yeah. It's kind of bizarre that he's even like mentioned on the cast list or in any wiki articles, because he's just a prop puppet that was sitting there. And when you really watch the opening, there's a ton of puppets all around Toulon's room that he's like working on and hasn't completed and aren't alive yet.
One of the puppets in particular that kind of actually had sort of like a little prominence in like the Action Eye comics was Drac, which was like one of the puppets that was like hanging in the room. And I kind of saw like
I feel like, that.
Yeah.
Shredder Khan, honestly, is iconic to me in Puppet Master lore because he's the first puppet that we technically see move on its own in the whole franchise. You don't actually see Blade, I don't think. You see a POV shot from Blade's point of view, I think, before we see Shredder Khan move. But he's the first animated puppet that we see. And it also kind of begs the question of where the fuck was he during the events at the Bodega Inn later in the movie? Was he doing like a Alex Whitaker and just wandering around the hotel? He did seem like a thoughtful little feller. Okay, he's just sitting out there looking, like gazing out the window in thoughtful fucking, you know, what do you call it? Contemplation, and just having a rad beard. You know, what do you think Shredder Khan's abilities would have been if he was to be involved in this? I think that weird tenderly beard would have came involved in it. And then obviously he's like probably got scimitars or awesome swords because he's like a Genghis Khan type of a.
I like how you mentioned the idea of having swords. He actually does have swords like in the comic. They kind of actually expanded his character in the Action Lab comics. Like he has swords in the comic.
Oh, cool. I've never read those. So.
And then actually kind of the reason why he wasn't really in the first film is because like in a way this wasn't the whole thing with his with Neil and his group wasn't like the first experiment with the puppets. The first was actually with a group of like college girls on Halloween. Queen and Shredder Khan basically messed the whole plan up, and as sort of punishment, Neil just basically drained all of his elixir. So
fuck, dude.
So in a way, like the reason why he's not roaming around is basically he's just inanimate.
That's
he's not
fucked up. Rest in peace, Shredder Khan.
It's still kind of still alive. Come back in the Leon and the like. This takes place in 19 like the whole comic series itself takes place like in present day, and he comes back as a actual prominent character and like one of the first in like the Blood Depth comic.
But if you're looking at it in a timeline sense, then not only is Shredder Khan the first puppet we see move on its own in Puppet Master, he's also the first one that dies. Even though it's temporary or whatever, but, you know, the puppets have died at different points or been injured, you know. And that's one of them. Pretty fucking cool. So I guess let's hand it over to Mikey for a minute so we can get his thoughts on Genji and Shredder Khan.
Well, you know what? I agree with you, Mo, about Genji. He kind of reminds me of Dalsim too, with a headband. I was thinking, I know he's a puppet, but I think about Dalsim from the Street Fighter games. Yeah, stretch his arms, punch, stretch feet to kick his victims. And Shredder Khan, if he was in a movie, he would probably wander around. He would probably have like a sword or special samurai ninja weapons or something. That's all I could think of.
Hell yeah, maybe one of his, because like Genghis Khan, the Huns or whatever. Maybe at some point he launches a diseased body over a wall, because that's what those motherfuckers were doing that all the time. I don't know how that would come in handy in the plot of a Puppet Master movie, but it'd be fun to see. So moving into the main cast, what we're obviously all here to discuss of the puppets. The first other puppet that we see is Blade, and it's also our introduction to the stop motion effects of the film. Masterfully fucking done stop motion effects by David Allen. Again, rest in peace. Sadly, many of these people that we'll talk about in a lot of these films are gone from us now, or not on good terms with Charlie Band anymore. It happens. But, David Allen really knocked it out of the park with this. Like, he did everything that he did. And it shows. I mean, that's, I wasn't really joking when I said a lot of that $400,000 that they used to make this probably went to securing the location and the fucking puppet effects, because that stuff is not cheap. It was time consuming back in these days. It took a lot of effort to make puppets move, especially that seamlessly. They talk in No Strings Attached about how one of the sequences, I think it's either the one where Blade it's not the raising the hand in the hallway. I think it's where like Pinhead climbs out of the coffin and then it shows him like walking or one of them. They talked about how it took like 2 days to do it, even though it's like 13 seconds of the movie, so that gives you an idea of what went into a lot of the stop motion back in these days. And now, obviously, even if you're not doing it with computers, they can do it a lot quicker and a lot more seamlessly now. I mean, that Pinocchio movie that Guillermo del Toro did is a good example of shit like that. Or I feel like Mad God is another one people were praising, and I saw clips from that, and it looked pretty sick. Stop motion has came a long way, but it came a long way off the shoulders of dudes like David Allen. So we owe them. I mean, he was like, I don't know if Harryhausen himself was doing the stop motion for those movies back in the day, but he came from a long tradition of stop motion artists, and I still feel like the David Allen stop motion is more seamless and smooth than stop motion I've seen in anything I've ever seen. If they could have afforded to keep doing Puppet Master movies with David Allen, I think that it would have made the series infinitely better than it eventually became. I don't know though. What do you guys think of Blade? I mean, he's clearly, even in this, again, I don't know that they had concrete sequel ideas already going at this point. I think they just thought that Puppet Master would be like a cool Tiny Terror thing to launch the label. Because obviously ideas from this were worked around and changed as the series evolved. But through accident or whatever, Blade is sort of the face of the movie and the puppet that is clearly the most proactive out of the group. He's the most trusted. Toulon's like letting him run around and do recon and shit while he's prepping to store all these puppets away. He comes in the clinch during the whole Dana Hadley kill sequence, which we'll get to. I mean, he's clearly the leader of the group, whether that was by design or what. I mean, I tend to lean towards the idea that maybe it wasn't in this first Puppet Master movie. Maybe they were just giving you all these puppets, and then his personality naturally took that turn as they were performing the shit. But that's something that struck me, especially this time, really thinking about it. Like, man, Blade really was like the face of the shit right from the beginning. Even though he's not my favorite puppet in the movie, he's still the dude. What do you think, Mason?
Yeah, well, come from, as like I said, Blade is my favorite puppet. He had been the most prominent of the film. The second being Pinhead, as he's like there's a beginning. In a way, he has seemed to have more free will than the other, since we never actually seen Pinhead, Tunneler, or Leech Woman in like the opening sequence were too long. We only saw Blade, Jester, Khan, and Genji, and Jester just being like either like in a time of before they actually had the idea for sequels being made. Blade was the only one that actually was properly active. Like he has like more like a big so required role in the group. And then there was his first later on in the movie, he was actually like kind of scouting out on like the other members of the hotel, almost like picking who to kill. Like, and then when going on to Frank and Clarissa, so when they were having sex, he kind of moved
it's
over.
Specifically in my notes that Blade is a peeping Tom.
Yep. Also Tunneler.
Wrote that down.
Also Tunneler.
His little eyeballs, you know.
I also kind of saw that whole sometimes like that daggers come out if I had kind of this simple connection with him being aroused or a king an erection of in some way.
It's a good, subtle but obvious, you know, kind of a innuendo that can be used with those little spike eyes or whatever. And his design is really cool. Obviously, we know they didn't like they back wrote the idea for his origin later, and it's a genius. We all know that already, and when we get to that, it's going to be fun to discuss. But just initially, pretending like this is the only Puppet Master movie that ever existed, his design's pretty fucking cool. You know, he's got the hook hand, he's got the knife hand, you know, both of them look mean as hell. The specific cut of the blade that they went with on Blade, it doesn't look like just a generic dagger or anything like that. It looks like something like some murderer would choose as his main weapon of destruction, you know. The spike eyes are cool. The weird ghost face is cool. The fact that he's like dressed just like the Nazi agents. Who do they ever actually show a swastika in this movie?
No, they just had like the black coat and the fedora. Like that's kind of like I guess is a little hint that it's in the
ever since what is it, Temple of Doom, we pretty much know that that's what a Nazi agent looks like, you know, that guy that burns his hand on the amulet or whatever. I think that's where it really comes from, is like that idea of that shit. Maybe movies that are older, but for my generation, Temple of Doom was where I was introduced to that style of a Nazi villain. But it does say, it goes a long way to, you know, in saying that there really isn't a swastika in this. All of the Nazi connection is inferred. They never, I don't think, even mention Nazis in this. I think they mentioned the war or something like that when they talk about Toulon coming over to the States. Did I say Temple of Doom? I definitely meant Raiders. But yeah, I think they mentioned the war at one point, unless I'm imagining that. But they never explicitly mention Nazis, but you know that it involves them, you know, because of those obvious Nazi villains, the fact that Blade's dressed just like one of them, the fact that Tunneler's clearly wearing like German Third Reich style, you know, military uniform. The vibe is there, and I think that that's a really cool touch to the movie. I mean, I don't think they really lean into the Nazi stuff till part 3.
Yeah, like the part 3 was basically like in part 2, Toulon gets like a brief mention of the Nazis when they kill his wife. It's only like part 3 where they have a more prominent
role. Then swastikas are all over the shit, and then that's something that would, you know, become a thing with the Axis trilogy later on and stuff. And I'm glad they leaned into the Nazi part of it. It's cool. Those guys were doing like weird supernatural experimentation all the time. If something like Andre Toulon existed in Europe at the time, the Nazis for sure would have found out about it and been trying to pursue it. So it makes perfect sense. But I love how subtle it is in this movie. And, you know, Blade's a good example of that. I guess let's toss it over to Mikey and get his thoughts on Blade real quick.
Of course, and Blade is one of my 2 favorite puppets. Yes. And I like the way he has got the knife and hook for hands, and he's always willing to kill. He does the most kills, and he's always killing all those Nazis. And whoever else is trying to use the other puppets, all the puppets for evil. That's what I'm talking about.
Fucking A.
And whenever something shocking happens, the spikes always come out of his eyes and his mouth opens. And he just has to go for it because something's going on and he's just going to have to go after and kill whoever.
Yeah, my eye spikes fly out on occasion as well. It happens. Yeah, he's great, man. I mean, then of course we have Jester, who really doesn't do anything in this movie, but I think Jester provides a special element to the atmosphere of the film, and obviously provides some sinister highlights on scenes like, you know, there's like a kill scene and then it'll pan over and Jester's face spins around and then he's got like a sinister look on his face, or through the whole ending sequence where the puppets are realizing like, holy shit, Neil is a scumbag and we made the wrong choice, so we've got to kill this guy now. Jester really sells the whole thing. He does a lot in the movie without ever having hands on with really any kill in the film, unless I'm missing a point in the Neil tussle where he helps them dispatch that guy. But I think Jester really just sits there and makes faces the whole time, but he's somehow a highlight of the movie. And Cody's not wrong in saying, you know, for me as well, that Jester is always one of my favorites. It's Cody's top favorite, but you know, that's not the case for me. We'll get to mine, but Jester is damn near tied with my favorite puppet of the entire franchise, just because there's something about it. I think, you know, when you think of Puppet Master, for me, I think of Blade first and foremost, just because he is kind of the face of the thing. But when I think of the vibe of Puppet Master, the atmosphere of the whole thing, like when I hear that Puppet Master theme music playing in my head, Jester is the puppet that I think of, you know. I don't know if that was by design or if it was just a happy accident, but I'm glad it's that way. Obviously, you guys have some things to say about Jester. We're going to let Mikey go first. You know, why don't you use this as an excuse to sort of give us your origin story there, Mikey? Obviously, you're heavily inspired by Jester.
Oh, yes. I was just going to say, too, Jester's my other favorite puppet. Him and Blade are my two favorite puppets. Jester's like one of the most important puppets because the head spins and the other puppets go out and kill. So it's kind of like a procedure somehow. And, alright. This is why I'm Jester Mikey, and this is why I make all these videos. Because I was inspired by Jester, and I had to come up with myself. I had to come up with my own character and hero warrior thing. Because the puppets fight and kill the Nazis, so I had this villain thing in my videos.
We're glad that you did too, man. I mean, you know, as soon as I really started diving into full moon content creation and things like that, you're one of the first people that I found, and I watched you for a long time before I haven't really ever interacted with you. And, you know, you're a good benchmark for an epic collection, you know. It's insane the amount of stuff that Jester Mikey has over there that hopefully will get showed off on this show. What about you, Mason? What are your thoughts on Jester in general? What are your general opinions of the puppet, his design, all that stuff?
Yeah, though despite not being like the only puppet to not kill anyone in the film, Jester still stands out as like one of the more iconic puppets of the franchise, mostly from how unique with the spinning head and changing faces. Like in a way, he kind of serves more of the role as sort of like the lookout in some later films, sort of like the right hand man to Pinhead in a way. What's also kind of unique about this first film in general, like we kind of know that nowadays, like Jester with his little hat, but in the first film he doesn't really have a hat. And aside from that, like one scene with Megan, but although it was in just like a silhouette.
Yeah, it's super weird that they have the hat and the silhouette, but he's never actually shown wearing it. But it just makes it better later on when you see him in full regalia, you know. Interestingly enough, too, in my opinion, you know, I'm on record as saying this on some live stream I did on my personal channel a long time ago, that the Jester replica is probably my favorite, like craftsmanship wise, you know. As much as I love all of my puppet replicas, some of them are cheaply thrown together. Like when you really get down and look at them, at the scenes and things like that, it's like, they could have done better on this. But Jester is like meticulously perfect. It's when you buy him, he's basically the puppet from the movie, you know. They all are, but Jester especially. Jester and Pinhead, I think, are the two that turned out the best of any replica they've ever done, because they're just so simply perfect to what they look like in the films and what they feel like they would feel like from the films. And you know, that's obviously not easy to do on a mass-produced scale for people to buy, you know. So credit to Full Moon for doing such a good job on those replicas, man. Jester is also one of the only puppets in the whole, really the only one, I think, that has to resort to picking up and using weapons at various points in the movies. So you could argue that Jester gives us the biggest connection franchise-wide, anyways, to traditional slasher films or killer doll films, because he doesn't have built-in weapons, you know. Like, I swear there's like a couple of parts where he like picks up a knife and stabs someone, or he like gets some really good assists and some kills, doesn't he, Mikey?
Yes, he sure does, yes. But in the 5th film with that meat tenderizer, whacking the one guy.
Like most of the time he's kind of assisting Pinhead in a way, especially like in the second film with also kind of long lines like he, in a way, like he's like I said before, he's kind of like the little brother of the other pup. Yeah. Kind of like care about him like the most, and when he gets hurt, they all act.
Mm-hmm. And you know, if there's a big brother of the group, it's definitely Pinhead. That's the next puppet that we got to talk about briefly here. You know, Pinhead is clearly the strongest. He's the brute force enforcer of the group, you know. Like in hockey terms, he'd be that guy that you'd send out there to check the other team, you know, to the captain of the other team or something, to teach him a lesson, right? Pinhead, obviously, I forget the name of the lady, and maybe Jester knows it, but there's a lady that played Pinhead in this movie. It's the only puppet that's pretty much played by a single person, not counting the stop motion sequences.
That's what's her name? Cindy Sourceman, something like that.
That sounds right.
In the movie with her hands,
mm-hmm.
For the punching effects. Cindy Sourceman, I believe her name is.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's probably true. That sounds right. And if it's not, I'm sure we'll correct it in the next one, because I think she did a couple of them, didn't she?
Yeah, I believe she did the first 3.
Yeah, so, you know, obviously we'll correct that later if we're wrong on the name now, but she does a great job. Her part in No Strings Attached, she seems like the most enthusiastic of all the people. Like, she's stoked to be playing this little puppet and kind of doing something different. I mean, it's, when you think of the history of little people in filmmaking, typically they get crammed in an R2 unit, or they get made to play a leprechaun or something like that. Like this wasn't even her playing a little person. This was her using her hands, which are uniquely suited to look like adult hands, but on a smaller scale, which is fucking cool as hell when you really think about it, you know. It's a shame that she couldn't have had a career that spanned the entire franchise, and I would love to, if she's still alive, see her come back and play Pinhead one last time. I think that would be really cool. But that adds a special level to Pinhead for me. Pinhead also always looked like the most huggable of the puppets. So as a kid, I think that's what made me gravitate towards him. He's my favorite. He's also the reason I think I like Curse of the Puppet Master so much. Pinhead is my favorite puppet, if I had to narrow it down to just one. And always will be. He gets the most kills in this film, technically. There is one where he's assisted by Blade, but Pinhead does the bulk of the work. He fights that lady across 2 floors of a fucking hotel.
Pinhead had most of the hits, but while Blade just did the killing blow.
Yeah, Pinhead put in all the grunt work for that one with Dana Hadley. And they really had a valiant battle, dude. Go ahead, Mikey.
Yeah, Pinhead starts with Dana Hadley by grabbing her leg and twisting and breaking her leg.
Through the skin, you know, not even just breaking it regular, like it's compound fracture through the skin. You can see the blood on the back of her leg as she's like crawling out of the room. Then he fucking kicks the shit out of her across an entire floor of the hotel, gets thrown down the stairs, then comes back in the elevator, kicks the shit out of her again, you know, and then Blade finally drops down and delivers the coup de grace or whatever they call it. And it's just great. I called it, you know, a fucking Tiny Terror tag team on my list of kills here. We actually skipped ahead to that one, but it's brutal. It's tense. It goes on for maybe too long, longer than you want it to, but there's a couple of kill sequences in this film that do that. And it's to the betterment of the film, I think. There's some moments in this first Puppet Master movie that are genuinely uncomfortable that I don't think they quite replicated again until Puppet Master 3. And then that was really the only time they replicated it again. They went for much more of like a lighthearted, not light. I don't want to say lighthearted, but but it is in horror terms. After the first 3 Puppet Master movies, they didn't really go into like uncomfortable territory too often. It's mostly just fun puppet kills and like Nazis and, you know, basement scientists. It's like you got 4 and 5 that play like Brain Scan. Then you've got, you know, part 6 that kind of plays like Pumpkinhead 2 a little bit. And then you've got, you know, the rest of them, which are like all that other stuff, you know. They lost a little bit of that true horror exploitation thing after the first 3. Is it fair to say that?
Yeah, it gets fair. I mean, I think it's coming along lines like in a way, despite being a horror franchise, the puppets themselves have only been the antagonists for like 4 or 5 films. The rest, they were basically the protagonists in a
Microphone's off.
Sorry, man. I'm always trying to like mute one of us in case Mikey forget. We'll get it dialed in here. But yeah, the first 2 are really the truest horror films of the bunch. The third one is, you know, obviously more of like a wartime drama that happens to involve puppets and things like that. And there's some horror elements to it. And then after that, they go in their own direction. And I love all of it, you know, but the first 2 are the proper like horror classics, I think, of the bunch. Especially part 2. When we get to that, we're going to talk about a lot of Universal monster connections and things that are involved in that film. But yeah, you know, I love me some Pinhead. Tunneler, as we've discussed, is probably the most brutal of the group, just being as he drills people. He definitely brings the Third Reich aesthetic to the whole thing with his uniform and everything like that. You guys got any thoughts on Tunneler? I'll let you go first, Mason, and then you tag in Mikey. I'll be right here. I have to let the dog back in, but I can still hear you guys.
Yeah. So for me, Tunneler is in a way the most unique, mostly since other puppets he kind of had the drill like his main weapons on top of his head. And in a way, his introduction is kind of unique. Like it started with him in the keel, and then it kind of cuts to him basically being under the bed. He kind of slowly starting his drill, wait for the kill. Almost like he sold like a loyal soldier kind of fits his sort of physique in a way. So yeah.
As a matter of fact, I believe Tunneler is one of the most deadliest puppets because he's got the drill moves, and he drills right through the victim's head, and the victim's dead. And any victims or villains or anybody moving around, Tunneler sees them, his drill starts to move, he just goes for it and drills a hole like in any of the body parts, and that's very deadly, and it's like gory in a lot of ways. That's what I have to say about Tunneler.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's hard to bounce back from having when you really get down to the full bore size of Tunneler's head, it's like that big. So when you have a hole that big bored in any size of your body or in any part of your body, it's going to debilitate you a little bit. I like his different facial expressions throughout the series, which we'll comment on as we get to the different designs of the puppets, because there's some comical choices that have been made in those over the years. But yeah, Tunneler's a favorite for me too. I think he's right up there with Jester and Pinhead of being favorite puppets, because he's the most abstract looking of them too. And I think maybe this is a reach, but when I was a kid, I was really into Coneheads as well. So seeing Tunneler kind of like connected with it made it feel like weird, like, why is this dude looks just like the Coneheads, but he kills you with his Conehead,
And so as far as I'm concerned, he's almost like the only puppet in the film to actually blink. Who can actually move his eyes in a sense.
I think you might be right. Or it's just a trick of the lighting. But another thing, is that he's on our list right here of kills, which we're going to knock out as we talk about these puppets. We kind of skipped over housekeeper head trauma with Pinhead, because we definitely see him like toying with the piano, presumably, and luring the housekeeper into a situation where he can knock her on the noggin with the old fire poker. I like to think an homage to Friday the 13th. And because, there's that whole bit where Jason gets the lady with the fire poker a couple of different times in the franchise, actually, if memory serves. But I like the scene. I especially like how the blood splats on the wood in the fire. I think that was the best touch of the whole thing. Because when you really get down to it, like, we talked about the Hinky headshot or whatever with William Hickey at the beginning, and it kind of being a little bit lame. But they instantly make up for it with that housekeeper death, because it's like, okay, now this splatter's getting a little more intense, right? Like, it's the same sort of effect, just splatter on a wall, but them doing it on the wood in the fireplace and it having that little bit of a sizzle makes it feel like meaner. You know what I mean? And I guess the fact that it's all tension and terror building up to this moment of her getting whacked, we don't have to see her try to sell the hit, she just is, it happens off camera and we see the splat on the thing. But the taste of Tunneler goes hand in hand with Leech Love, which are that's our first proper kill sequence of the movie, and it's a twofer and it's glorious. Again, some of the most iconic stuff in the entire franchise. I mean, you mentioned that scene where she looks under the bed and you see Tunneler kind of step out from around that thing and then charge at her with his drill. There's something so terrifying about that, right? Like, if you looked under your bed and you saw like an animated toy, that's going to be weird enough, but then it noticing you would make you even more scared, like, oh shit, it's on me. And then it charges at you with a drill skull. I think that's pretty fucking scary. I don't know if I'm alone there, but the whole idea of it does still kind of freak me out, And then I love that it's not revealed that she takes it in the mouth until later at the dinner scene. We've gotten sequences later where we see Tunneler actually drill into someone. But this first one is so classic to me because it's like a Friday again, I think maybe a Friday the 13th homage. where you know that the person died, but you don't actually see what happened to them until that final reveal later in the film, you know. I don't know. You guys got any thoughts on those kills? We'll go with you first, Mason. Almost called you Megan again.
Anyways, like for me personally, like because in a way, aside from the final kill, like each kill is basically kind of centered around like one puppet in a sense. Like there's the housekeeper, but Clarissa getting killed by Pinhead with the fire poker. There's Clarissa and Frank being killed by Tunnel and Leech Woman respectively. There's Dana getting technically getting killed by Blade since he's the one who dealt the final blow. It's almost like in a way like each aside from Jester, each puppet kind of gets their own sort of kill in the film, and before like the final one with Neil in a sense. Kind of like each one kind of shows what each puppet is basically capable of, how they kill the victims, how they work.
Yeah, they each get their own showcase, and then there's the final, like, you know, collaborative effort to, I call it deconstructing Neil, is what I named the kill. What about you, Mikey? What are your thoughts on the two for there with the taste of Tunneler and a little bit of that Leech love?
Well, they each get their own killing and put on their own action, because Tunneler kills Clarissa, and Leech Woman's on the bed with what's his name?
Frank,
right. So Leech Woman puts the leeches on Frank's chest. So it's like their own action, and they each get to kill their own victim. That's what I think.
Well, and that puts us in a good position here to share our thoughts on Leech Woman. She's the last puppet on our list here, and the one that I believe has the most immediately impending solo project, right? Isn't there supposed to be a Furnace Leech Woman movie coming out? I'm still not stoked about the Furnace part of that. I think they should have just did a regular Leech Woman movie, but doesn't she have one coming out in the near future?
Yeah, there is a word about her getting like her own solo flick in this. And it says like a cut like on the lines like a sort of like an expert needs to like what happened to us. It's you know, when talking about like Curse, she appears in that film, and there was sort of like this whole question like where that film exactly takes place. Does it take place after 4 and 5, or it takes place in between 1 and 2? I
think the real answer lies somewhere in the region of it happened when they needed to make a movie to sell some more Puppet Master toys. Yeah. But you know, if we're gonna be nerds about it, which is what makes this fun, we got to put it chronologically somewhere, and I can understand the argument. I don't know, man. I mean, what are your general thoughts on Leech Woman? I think she's gross. I think she's creepy. I think she's sexy in an abstract way that's made me feel confused since I was a child. I think if they don't make the Leech Woman movie about somebody forming a twisted love circle with her and like a woman, they're missing a huge opportunity. You know, I think that element of Leech Woman needs to be played upon, because that's always what they're hinting at with her involvement in this stuff. No more so than in this movie right here. I mean, the Leech Woman part of that kill is so fucking uncomfortable, dude, with the sounds that she's like making. And as a kid, it was like one of those moments where it was like, had I been older, it might have been my first ever encounter with like a confusing boner, you know. Like when I watch it now, I'm kind of like, this sucks, and it's like gross and everything, but why am I weirdly turned on by this fucking puppet making those noises and spitting leeches on these people? Maybe it's just a quirk I have that I need to work through. I don't know, but I don't think I'm alone in that. I mean, I think that's the design of the character, is that she's supposed to be that. And I think she, honestly, of all the puppets that they've ever done, Leech Woman is the most like 80s idea. And hear me out, like all the other puppets, it's very practical. Like their name kind of figures into what they do. Their obvious physical attributes are kind of their power, you know. 6-shooter has 6 arms, you know what I mean? Like, but Leech Woman spits leeches onto people. It feels like, and this isn't, again, this is not me trying to say anything bad about Leech Woman, because obviously I love the puppet. I'm super stoked to see what her movie turns out like, and I hope they go full sleaze with it, like I mentioned. But she feels like she would be like that C-ranked toy in an 80s toy line, you know, like just so random. She spits leeches. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You remember toys from back then, Mikey? How they would just like have just a fucking random power. You know?
Yes, I remember those back in the day. Yes, I do.
Yeah, that's Leech Woman. She's just like, she spits leeches and her hair turns blue in the bathtub. That was like an 80s toy, you know. So yeah, I like her because of that. But I don't know. You guys got any other thoughts on Leech Woman you want to throw out there? We'll start with you, Mason. Mason tags in Mikey. We'll work it like that.
Yeah. Well, of course, the Leech Woman was basically like the only female member group, and for a while, like the only female puppet until Bombshell and acts as Rising. And in a way, she kind of serves up so like the seductress, as she went in her introduction, like when she's on Frank, she's just kind of like nibbling on her chest.
You can say nips, dude. Nips is permitted on this channel.
Nibbling on almost like it started as like just sexual.
You wanted to say it too.
In a way, she just
right there.
placing like little marks for her to spit the leeches. It's almost like they saw like it's just in a way it's sort of like a suspenseful thing. Like we kind of know like all the other puppets, they kind of have these things to like kill people, and then there's this. Then Leech Woman just shows up. She just move on, just trying to seduce this guy. And well, like what like is that what she does? Is she just like what is she doing? And then came like the whole thing where she starts coughing up the leech and the guy
so bizarre, dude.
He was been blindfolded, so he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know.
And then when he gets his eyeball out and sees it, he's like, "Ah!" Yeah. I love that fucking part of this movie so much, dude. Yeah. It is maybe my favorite scene in the entire movie.
Yeah, and then like, her mouth becomes like super big, like inhuman. Like it's like
like a snake unhinging its jaws or something like that.
Yeah,
and she pukes a leech onto him. Yeah. And as a kid, I mean, again, like you pointed it out, I think right there, you can kind of look at the other puppets and tell what they can do. You know, like they're all very obvious. Leech Woman is like that character that's, you know, it's ambiguous. You don't know. You look at the puppet and it just looks like a tiny lady. Big deal. Well, it is a big deal when she can spit out like these massive leeches on you that totally suck you dry. I mean, that's such a, and I like the whole succubus connection with it too on multiple levels. That's a cool element of the Leech Woman character. I feel like she kind of influences characters in other media. Like there's that character of the woman in The Boys, if you've ever read the comic books, who's like super deadly, but you look at her and she just looks like nothing, you know. And I think Leech Woman maybe influenced some of those characters, or in the very least is part of a long history of those types of characters, you know, where it's like the unassuming small brunette girl in a group of crazy powered people. And I mean, at the end of the day, Leech Woman doesn't even have the most practical power of all of them. You know, she's right there with Jester in terms of like actual usefulness when it comes to superpowers, but they somehow managed to find themselves at the coolest moments in some of the series, which I think is awesome. It says something to the writers, the people that were coming up with this kind of stuff, you know. So that does it for our puppets list, you know. I guess pretty much we've kind of laid out the plot of the film for you guys. You know, essentially, Avengers group of psychics are brought together at this hotel by their dead friend who was looking for this puppet master's secret. You know, he's found it and he's trying to eliminate all of them so he can keep it to himself. Yada, yada, yada. We've talked about all the cast of characters. We've talked about the entire cast of puppets, and we've talked about a good amount of the kills, really. The only kills we haven't talked about is the Tiny Terror tag team, where Blade and Pinhead absolutely have the most epic battle with Dana Hadley. We've alluded to it, but do you guys have anything else you'd like to say about that sequence? We're going to switch it up this time. We're going to go with Jester Mikey first. Okay. I'm sorry, Megan. I mean, Mason.
She called me Megan. It's been like a running joke throughout this whole live stream.
I think it's going to become a running joke through the series. You know, we have a bunch of movies with Megan Ward in them to discuss as well, right, Mason? It's going to be your first name and your last name also literally make the word Megan. This is fucking awesome. Yeah. This is the best thing that we've ever decided to do. Yeah. Mikey, tell us your thoughts, man.
All right, thoughts with the tag team with Blade and Pinhead? All right, with Dana Hadley. Well, Pinhead starts it, of course. He twists and breaks Dana Hadley's leg, and the skin goes through. And she's crawling around. They're fighting. She tosses Pinhead. And she gets out of the room. Pinhead goes after her, punches her, and she throws Pinhead all the way down the stairs. And she gets into the elevator, and Pinhead's back, punches her again, and she tosses him again, and Blade comes and finishes her off, slits her throat. And they kill her together. That's all I have to say.
Well, that is what happens, in fact, but I'm curious to hear what you think about that stuff. Like, what's your favorite moment in the entire sequence? You know, what do you think about her indecision in the elevator, taking her down to literally the point where she threw Pinhead to 2 seconds ago? It's probably the only dumb thing Dana Hadley does in the whole movie is going down. She just threw the puppet down there. You know, do you have any more nuanced thoughts on various points of that interchange? I mean, what's your high point in the whole thing? And yeah.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to say that when Blade just finishes her off, like to finish the killing, like finish the job, something like that.
Yeah, I do like that moment because it feels almost reserved, like Dana has just accepted that. Do you guys also want to know something that I'm surprised neither of you have brought up at this point, but is true about this sequence, is it's one of the only stock and slash sequences, because that is what it is, even though it happens in a different way than most stock and slash sequences in other slasher films. It is a stock and slash sequence. You know, Pinhead breaks her leg and she's kind of crawling through the place trying to get away from them. And the crawling makes it even more similar to your traditional stock and slash because it puts her at about the same walking speed as the puppets, you know. So it just brings it down to that scale, which is genius. You know what I mean? Like if she's just running around the hotel, she could outrun the puppets all night and just not have to deal with them, you know. But with a broken leg crawling on the floor, she's moving at the same speed as them. And then she has this heroic fucking fight with Pinhead throughout 2 floors of the hotel. You know, never once in that entire time does she scream for help or scream at all. Have you guys ever really thought about that when you're watching Puppet Master? Like Dana does not scream for help. She doesn't scream out she doesn't scream out in any real capacity. It's one of the most relaxed fight/death sequences you'll ever see in a horror film. Yeah, because I think she kind of knows that if she dies fighting these things, it'll make it more real for everybody else, sort of a thing. And she already saw it happening to begin with, you know, so it brings all the gimmicks of the movie to close in a really good way, like in concept with this fight with her. Maybe I'm looking too much into this, but the fact that she never screams out for help or never even like screams out in agony or any of that stuff makes it such a weird fight / death sequence in a horror movie, but makes it awesome at the same time. What do you think, Mason?
Yeah, it was kind of like, although like when I like say like one kind of this highlight, like that kind of brings up the little fact that Pinhead possibly went through like the most abuse in the film out of all the puppets. I mean, he's been thrown through a wall. He was thrown down the stairs. He got his head popped off, and then like it's kind of good that he's just basically the mother's, because if any of the other puppets kind of deal with
They might not have survived it.
Yeah. And of course, the little moment with Blade with this after he sliced Dana's neck,
that like throat slit is so good.
He stared at a knife like a.
Yeah, his reaction and the way that her throat looks all meaty and split open, like the effects are perfect. The puppet reaction is perfect. I mean, it's iconic.
Yeah.
You know. What about you, Mikey? What are your thoughts? Do you have any other thoughts on that sequence?
I'm surprised that Dana didn't like scream or call for help like most victims do. And she was just fighting Pinhead, and of course she got killed by Blade. That's all I'm gonna have to say.
Well, I mean, because Dana was never a victim, I think. She was so badass right to the end that she's like, I think at a certain point in that, in my mind, because when you look at it on the list, like she's the person being dead that they would have missed most immediately, I would think. You know, like Frank and Carissa were busy banging and doing weird shit and like recording the results or whatever. And Alex is like around the place, but you know, Dana was walking around like blessing people's doors and interacting with them and trying to bang Alex at one point. So, and he actually turns her down too, which is really maybe the worst thing Alex does in the whole movie. I would have taken Dana up on that in a second. Holy shit, dude. You bring those chicken feet into it, it could have been quite the night. But, you know, Dana would have been the first person you'd miss if she's not around doing crazy Dana shit, right? So it makes some sense, whether this was intentional on their part or not, that at a certain point in that she would reserve herself to dying for it, you know, like to make them take it seriously. Because Dana really was the character that took the threat of the whole thing seriously from the very beginning. You know, there was no questioning of it with her. She knew what was up, and she was going around blessing people's doors. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is where she's doing that blessing as Alex walks up, and she's talking to him, and she just kind of casually lights that flash paper, like, you know, blessing scroll thing that she attached to it. It's so good. Her character is perfect, as we've discussed. But now I guess really this leads us to our, you know, final sequence here. Deconstructing Neil. Brought to you by all of the puppets that we just listed on this fucking list.
Minus Jester.
Of course. What do you guys think about the whole finale sequence with Neil? Okay, let's just, instead of talking about just the kill, let's first talk about the slimy build-up to it, where there's the reveal that Neil's still alive, him explaining his whole thing in that smarmy fucking supervillain way that just makes you want to punch him in the throat the entire time. The looks on his face make it even worse too. Credit to the actor. You know, right up to the whole sequence of the puppets dismantling that ass like he deserved. I guess we'll go with you first, Mason.
Okay. Yeah, for me, like the first sequence, like the twist that he's actually still alive is actually kind of surprising, and in a way, it's kind of revealed more of a scumbag. Like in like even before this scene, we kind of know that Neil wasn't really a good person. He sexually assaulted a woman. He basically screwed his colleagues over once, and they all want to get even, and now he kind of goes on this little tangent, like he knows that they were going to try and find the magic. He has to kill them, and he basically saw the puppets nothing more, just tools for his plan, saying like, I'm tired of experimenting on silly little wooden puppets, and it slows just like they don't mean much. And then the reveal of the reason why Megan's parents died is because he was the one who killed them just to experiment on Too Long's magic to be more. And so in a way, that was their death is basically kind of the reason why Megan kind of married Neil in the first place, because he was there to kind of comfort her, despite the fact that he was the one responsible for their deaths with her not knowing that. So in a way, there's
it's so fucking sinister, dude.
Yeah,
like to kill a girl's parents and then move in and take over her hotel that she inherited. That stuff's fucking scary. And there's people that do that all the time, like that's not even that crazy of an occurrence in our society. Continue, Mason. You probably had more to say. I didn't mean to cut you off, bud.
And then we kind of go on to see, like, now at the reveal, he basically slaps Megan, and he's ready to kill Alex, basically punching him repeatedly in the face. Then the little chase kind of leading him being trapped in the elevator by Pinhead, who was kind of interesting how, in a way, he was actually the first to react / attack Neil, and Neil says kind of go on lines of how he's sort of like the bit older brother of the puppies. He's the first to kind of take action when one of them gets hurt.
True enough. And we're going to break that scene down right now. I have to step over here once again to let this dog back out. But I'm going to need you guys for one moment to talk about our next film that's on the list here, which is Meridian, Kiss of the Beast. So, just go ahead and give a little preview to the folks out there listening of your thoughts on this. Trade back and forth as we've been doing, so as to not have any audio anomalies, and I'll be right back.
So yeah, for me, Meridian was called like dark romance kind of story. In a way, it's like the full moon version of Beauty and the Beast in a way, with this one guy who is cursed, and he turns into a monster though, and this one he can actually change from human to beast, and the main protagonist is basically this one brother. In a way, it's sort of like a sort of twist on, like, there's this one monster is actually like the main antagonist in a way. It's to like kind of say my thoughts on when we get to the film. It's kind of like a simple cool dark romance, and as well as being so like in the films on full moon, like this introduction to Phil Fondacaro, who becomes a like prominent actor in a lot of full moon's films. So, yeah.
Yeah, Meridian is like the Beauty and the Beast of full moon, because there's twins, one good, one evil, and the good one turns into a beast.
It's true. So tune in next Saturday, same time, same place, for that discussion, because we're going to be fucking with some Meridian. As I said earlier in the chat, before we got on here, it's the least full moon movie in this whole set, because it really is more akin to like some Euro horror exploitation stuff you probably saw in high school or college, back when you were first becoming aware of the wider world of fucked up things that people have made movies about. And I think there's a little bit of that DNA in Puppet Master. There's a little bit of that leftover, like exploitation DNA from when Charles Band was making and releasing movies through the 70s and the 80s. I think that's why the Nazis feature so prominently in Puppet Master. It really kind of harkens back to the Nazi exploitation stuff back in the day. Even in this first one, there's some love for the early slasher films that he was involved in. You know, you got a little bit of Tourist Trap in here. You got a little bit of Invader in here. You got, you know, Charlie Band had a history with releasing films before Full Moon. So the first Full Moon movie is, you know, really just kind of an amalgamation of all of his interests and a lot of cool stuff added by David Schmoller. I know you guys are on that super fan level, so there are things I'm going to say about Charlie Band and maybe his relationships with people and how those could have been handled. There are things like that that will make you uncomfortable as we do this series, but it's all in good love in the sake of proper film critique, okay? I don't have anything against Charlie Band. He's one of those dudes like Roger Corman or H.G. Lewis or anybody that did the sleazy used car salesman style of film marketing and producing throughout the years. Those are the guys that built our entire childhood. You know, without those dudes, we wouldn't add all the drive-in movies and slasher films and the 80s schlock that got released on VHS for us to all enjoy throughout our wonderful lives that we've had because of it. And I'm not going to shy away from it when it's terrible, but I'm also not going to go out of my way to rip into it because of that. You know, Full Moon, you watch these movies, you kind of have to have a certain level of expectation from it, which is really somewhere between a trauma film and mainstream horror. You know, that's exactly what Charlie Band was going for. He wanted to be low budget mainstream horror. That's why a lot of this stuff has that appeal. That's also why some of it, though, has that weirdo Charlie Band bent to it, where it's kind of like hypersexual and fun and crazy and weird, you know. We're going to dissect all the nuances of that as we go through this. I guess the only thing left to do for Puppet Master before we close this out is share our favorite scenes. Do you guys have like a we'll do a favorite scene, favorite kill, and then we'll discuss the music, because that is a huge proponent of this as well. But you know, I guess I'll go last. Mason, do you have a favorite scene, like just in general, and then do you have a favorite kill?
For me, I feel like my favorite scene is basically like when Blade was what it was basically like the second POV scene with Blade, where he's running down the hallway. He's trying to peek into the other guest room, and then knowing that he can't reach, he kind of takes this chair. He kind of like moves around. It's like
he pulls a chair up to peep on those people. Man.
Yeah,
he's a proper peeping Tom.
Yeah, possibly the horniest out of all the puppets. And
literally,
yeah.
What about like favorite kill?
Favorite kill, I think it's basically time between Dana's death, for like, so the process of it, like it starts out with Pinhead. He basically breaks her leg. She can't really move, walk. She has to crawl, and then there's now tension leading to Blade coming in for the kill, knowing that this is, and it was sort of like a thing of a kill that was basically foreshadowed in like near the beginning of the film. Like this, like once that scene happens, once she kind of sees Blade jump down and sees a knife, she like knows that this is actually the end, like the one that she was trying to prevent.
That's the only point where she doesn't struggle through the whole thing.
Yeah,
you know, which leads me to believe she accepted that it needed to happen. You know. So yeah, I guess on to you, Jester. Mikey, favorite scene, favorite kill.
Oh, I'm gonna have to definitely say my favorite kill is when all the puppets except Jester kill Neil Gallagher, because he's a very bad man, and I think he got what he deserved. And I'm gonna have to say that's my favorite scene as well, because I like the good guy, bad guy thing. So killing Neil Gallagher is my favorite thing of all in the whole movie. That's what I gotta say, because he did all these bad things. He married Megan, killed her parents, and used the puppets for evil, kill all these victims, and brought the sidekicks together, killed the three, Dana, Frank, and Clarissa, and Neil Gallagher throws Jester, and then the puppets finally realized, and they had to take him out. That's my favorite scene and killing in the whole movie.
It really is, and we did kind of like skim over really talking about the finale sequence here, which I think we should rectify. This can be 2 minutes, 15 minutes, or 2 hours, 15 minutes, whatever. But the whole finale sequence where the puppets slowly realize that Neil is a bad guy, you know, is maybe one of my favorite sequences in horror history, you know. Because it is that swerve. You mentioned it earlier, Mason, where like you think the puppets are the villains the whole movie, but then at the end they kind of realize that they've been taken in by a villain, which isn't the first time it happens in the series. Or I mean, it isn't the last time that it happens in the series. But it's just such a powerful moment. Like he throws Jester, and then Jester's like, "What the fuck? You know, are you guys going to stand by and do something and not do anything?" And the puppets kind of do stand by and not do anything for a minute. But then as it progresses, you can see that Jester is also realizing like, whoa, he's just being mean to this lady that was like, you know, his wife. Like basically you can tell the puppets take the people around their puppet master just as seriously as the puppet master themselves, you know? There's a lot of nuance to that whole scene when you really break it down, where like the puppets are realizing this dude's a shit person that they should not have backed as the scene is playing out. And then obviously it comes to a gory conclusion. I mean, the way they pull him apart in that last sequence is amazing. You know, every single puppet gets to showcase their power with the exception of Jester because he doesn't have any. And it's just glorious, dude. You know, especially Blade, you know, stabbing. My favorite part in the whole sequence, and maybe you guys can list yours as well, but my favorite part in the whole dismantling Neil sequence of the movie is where Blade sticks his blade into his hand and then detaches it so that it'll hold him there while he walks up and like fish hooks his mouth open so that Leech Woman, or I think he does it like that so that Leech Woman can puke the leech into his mouth. Perfection. What about you, Mason? What's your favorite?
In a way, also the progression for the puppet, but there's also progression for Neil. Like when the puppets first turn like when Pinhead started attacking, he wasn't all that funny. He was all like, "What the hell you think you're doing? I'm gonna open that door, I'll chop you into firewood." Like he isn't that intimidated by Pinhead, just throws it around. And then when the other puppets started turning on him, like when he started drilling his leg, he starts to realize that he's actually in trouble. Almost like in a way, like he doesn't fear Jester or Pinhead, but the other one she's actually afraid, in a way, afraid of, because after tunnel attack, he realized that he's in trouble and he has to get out of there. And then Blade comes in and he chopped his fingers.
I love when he slides them off too.
Yeah,
I think that's one of my favorite parts. The whole thing is masterful. Okay, I think any horror fan that looks at this stuff and compares it to anything else, they could say all they want about this being lower budget or schlockier or whatever, but that final sequence in Puppet Master, I think, stands up next to anything else from any other 80s horror film. You know, it's gnarly, bro. I especially love the sliding off of the fingers. I especially love the fact that, like you said, he increasingly gets more terrified as it goes on. I love the fact that it's sort of scaled to the size of the puppets, like in terms of the running length of the It's a long sequence, you know, a long, painful sequence, which is scaled down intentionally, I think, to the size of the puppets. You know, puppets that size could kill you easily, but it's going to take a while and it's going to be real painful. And that's pretty much what this shows, you know. Him bleeding the formaldehyde, I think, is such a good touch. I mean, let's be honest. Did you guys always think, like, did you just retcon it in your mind to be the Puppet Master serum? Or was there ever that moment where it dawned on you that, okay, it's like formaldehyde or embalming fluid because he was dead, you know?
I'll admit, I thought it was kind of just a wet comment that it was just see almost it's in.
And that's fair enough.
There was like that one
understand.
scene where, in a way, there was like a dripping green fluid when the fingers
When it cuts off his fingers, yeah.
There was.
That's fair enough. I think that might be the way that the yellow just photographed, you know, because they, as Charlie Band will remind you, they shot this stuff on film and then sent it to a place that turned it into the shitty 4x8 stuff that we've seen our whole lives, you know, or the 4:3 or whatever it is, that resolution. It sucks, but I have a nostalgia for it. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, the whole final sequence with him is amazing. There's nothing about that doesn't kick ass. And it is just driven home by the fact that it takes so long that Megan finally is like, stop. That's that might be my favorite moment in Puppet Master, actually. Above even my favorite scenes is where she finally is so like disturbed by it that she starts yelling for it to stop, you know. And clearly she wants him to die too. I mean, you know, he fucked her over worst of all. He killed her parents. But it goes on so long that it's so disturbing that she's like, please stop, you know. Masterful finale sequence for a horror film, and stands up next to anything else that I can describe. So, do you guys have any other favorite scenes in the movie that we didn't mention during the period of this? I will say one of my favorites is the Leroy lives scene at the end of the movie where she lays down the puppy, and it turns out that Megan is a puppy master. You know what I'm saying? She might not have been a puppet master, but she is a puppy master for sure. I think my other favorite scene that isn't a kill scene might be the stuff with the undead Neil showing up in people's rooms and things like that. I think that was played out really well. And especially if you were watching this movie for the first time, I think you would assume that it was the puppets moving him around just like I did, you know. Maybe I'm wrong, but you guys got anything else you want to throw out there for this before we close out this episode?
Actually, you know what? Yeah. In one scene, when Neil Gallagher is in the coffin and Megan is like right by her, one of the puppets is like behind the curtain, like in the window, moving.
That's true, and it is the Jester puppet, as we mentioned, and it's a good one. What about you, Mason? You got anything else you want to throw out?
One other favorite scene is basically like sort of Pinhead's introduction scene where he comes out of Neil's coffin. He slowly comes out. He just looking around, and just jumps out. That
one of my favorites as well. I feel like one that maybe Mikey can correct me on this, but I feel like they've used parts of that in some of the like Video Zone intros or like promotional stuff over the years, where like there was a quick clip of Pinhead's hands like coming out of the coffin in some of them. But yeah, man. Go ahead, Mikey.
Well, I don't know if they really showed in any of the promotions or anything. Maybe one, I'm not really sure. But they mentioned in the behind the scenes, No Strings Attached, that the scene the last 13 seconds took 2 days to produce, and I believe that's the scene with Pinhead coming out of the coffin. That's all I know.
Yeah, I'd alluded to that earlier, and I think that's exactly the one, if we're both remembering it that way. And it makes sense, but I can understand also why Full Moon couldn't afford to keep doing that going forward, you know. you can't pay for that stuff all the time, especially with dwindling rental returns and all the shit that comes along with that. So we'll break down why certain full moon movies suck other than like compared to other ones. I think we're all three of the mentality that we like what full moon does, and even the sucky movies are like fun, you know. I do get the idea it might be hard for you guys to admit that some of them do suck, though. But it's, you know, it happens, man. I mean, they can't all be winners. Full Moon has always managed to come back from obscurity and suckage to do really cool stuff, too. So, really, once we get through the early 2000s era, it's pretty much well balanced with really good stuff and then really sort of bad stuff, but that's fun bad stuff, so you can't be mad at it, you know. So that's it, guys.
Yeah, I just want to say something.
Good.
Yeah, like in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, all the movies like really good, but then like in the late 90s, the movie started to go bad. Like it wasn't as it was.
Yeah, there's the dark times from like 1999 to like 2000. I would say 6. A lot of people would say 2010 to 2012, 14 in there. I think even from 2006 they were doing some fun stuff again. I mean, Doll Graveyard, and there was building up to Evil Bong. I mean, it's not the best. It's obviously you can't compare it to like 90s era Full Moon, but it's still pretty fucking fun, you know.
Gonna be interesting when we actually talk about the first Killjoy movie.
Oh, we'll get there.
Yeah.
You know, this first series is just the core 90s shit, the stuff that everybody thinks of when they think of Full Moon, you know. When we're done with that,
The Paramount era.
right, exactly, that Paramount Home Video era, and then that small period afterwards up until like Witch House, where they were still doing some fun stuff with and doing the best that they could, you know. Eventually we will, you know, after we hit that point, once we're done with the full proper 90s run of it, we'll probably take a break, you know, for like half a year or something. I don't know. We'll do some stuff in between. I mean, I have like a kaiju podcast that I really want to do where we talk about all the Godzilla movies and stuff like that. And then we'll come back with the Full Moon and we'll do all the modern stuff. You know, I promise it'll only be like 6 months, maybe a year. Because we want people to want this also. You know, like in that year, people will watch the shit that we did from this full 90s run series, the first season, if you will, and be like, damn, you know, I really want to be in on it when they do the rest of the Full Moon stuff. I think honestly, it'll probably be like 3 months. We'll do a limited series where we cover all the Gamera movies or something, and then we'll be back with Full Moon, you know, the Nocturnal Emissions episodes as we're doing. And it'll be pretty special. We just got to, you know, keep covering them with that passion, baby. I think this first episode went really well. We had some hiccups, you know, but that's the way that it goes. We broke down Puppet Master as best as I can do for you guys, given my talents and my whatever. I think we didn't really leave anything out. If you guys have anything else you want to say about Puppet Master before we close this out, feel free to let me know. I'm going to try to stop stepping on that Red Bull can that I dropped down there. And we're going to close this out with some goddamn dignity and a little bit of pride, because I think we did a good episode right now, you guys.
We sure did. And this is only my first live stream. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was really cool to be out, man.
Yeah, Jester, you're welcome on every Full Moon live stream or any live stream you ever want to join. We just got to get you a good pair of headphones.
Yes, yes, because it's my first time, and you know, I gotta get used to this live stream connecting.
Yeah, we'll get you set up, bro, because we need you in these. And your mic actually sounds pretty good. I like that it has that same quality as your videos, you know. So
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, that's how I want it to be.
yeah, you sound like Jester Mikey, so that's good.
Because
Look
I
like
am
him, too.
Jester Mikey, and you got it.
As far as I'm concerned, he's the real deal. Do you have any reason to believe this isn't the real Jester Mikey, Mason?
No, not at all. It's the real deal, all right.
All right.
I can tell.
Yes, because if it was an imposter or somebody else, it wouldn't be this voice. It would be a different voice and be maybe a different mask or different body, like a different person.
You used to be a different mask. I'm still getting used to the new one. I like it though. You did a good job.
I sure did, because that other mask was the official Jester mask that Full Moon, well, the costume company came out with like years ago. That was the official
I'll
Jester
always be
mask.
nostalgic for those days. Like if I ever had you come do a Jester Mikey live event, I might request it. I like the idea of it slowly rotting on your face too, like a Slipknot mask or something. Yeah.
Yeah, those latex masks, they rot at one point. I heard like you gotta wash and clean them out.
So we kind of talked about it briefly earlier, and we might as well finish this discussion out with it. What off of our list of, scheduled films for the remainder of 2023 is your guys' most anticipated discussion? I think this one went amazingly well, so these are going to be great. We're going to add more people into these as we go. We're going to, get various directors involved in these. That stuff aside, just considering it being us three discussing these, what is your most anticipated discussion off of that list?
I gotta say, aside from the Puppet Master film, but I think my most anticipated is Bad Channels, mostly for the one fact of how Full Moon tries to actually have films connected, like they exist in in a same universe in a way.
Yeah, man, Bad Channels is a perfect example of a film that does that and does it well because it does it casually. The point, like it being connected to other Full Moon shit, isn't the main point of the movie, but it is the final thing you're meant to take away from it. So perfect, like bridging the gap crossover film. Just a shame they couldn't have kept Charlie Spradling involved in the preceding film. What about you, Jester Mikey? What's one off that list that if you had to pick the one that you're the most stoked about?
I'm gonna have to definitely say Doll Man.
Do you have a reason, or just because Doll Man rules? Because I'll accept either.
Well, yeah, because he goes on the adventure and he's from another planet and he goes after Sprug and he comes to Earth and he's 13 inches and he's like a little doll that shoots off all the bad guys.
That's what he does, and it's pretty fucking cool. One of my favorite moments in Doll Man is where he's like making fun of that kid for being fat at the beginning of the movie. I love Doll Man. It is honestly, I always say, and I'm sure Jester has heard me go on record of this, it's the most rewatchable Full Moon movie because you can just put it on at any time with anybody and they're gonna like it. I mean, Doll Man, it's hard not to love Doll Man, You have to go out of your way to not love that movie because it's just fun. Albert Pune knew what he was doing. Rest in peace again. That's like 5 people we've had to announce were dead since we started this, which is a little depressing. But we're going to keep them alive with our reviews of their fucking awesome Full Moon content. So thanks for joining us tonight, guys.
It's a pleasure, Mo.
Yeah, no problem.
Means the world to me that you guys came on here for this. You honestly, both of you guys, I'm not saying this just to gas you up because you came on for the episode. Jester Mikey knows how much I respect him. I think I've thrown that out there and crossed enough episodes over the last year.
Yes, I believe I heard that. Yes.
so you're not someone I'm taking lightly being involved in this. And Mason, you're rad, man. I mean, you're the dude I think of when I think of full moon anniversaries, because you're always the one sharing that stuff in the groups. So yeah, when I think of like, oh, how old is this movie? Immediately I think of you, and that's pretty cool. We've always had a good time talking about full moon movies. I think as we do this, you're going to get more relaxed and better at it, and we're going to have a fucking good time, dude. It's going to be sick. We're going to get some other people up in here. We're going to have some raucous nights talking about full moon movies because they deserve it as well,
Yeah.
Next movie on our list, of course, is Meridian, as we already kind of showcased to you guys. We'll be doing that next Saturday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, just like we did this week. After that, we have... Well, let's just run through the October lineup, I guess. After that, we have Shadow Zone, then Crash and Burn, then Puppet Master 2. So if you want to watch the movies and get familiar with them as we build up to these episodes, those are the ones that you need to be looking out for. Thanks for listening. I think that we've, done a good job of covering this movie, and I think that we're going to do a good job of covering the next one. So if you want to tune in, do it. Tell your friends, and we'll see you back here next time.
Later, Mo. Later, Mason.
See ya.